The morning, Thomas Harper rode into Carlin, Nevada with nothing but a worn saddle and 17 cents to his name. He had no idea that the woman breeding horses on the edge of town would become his entire world. The year was 1882, and the mining town sat nestled in the northeastern corner of the state, where the railroad brought as much trouble as prosperity. Thomas had been drifting for 3 years since leaving his family's failed ranch in Wyoming, taking work where he could find it, never staying long enough to put down roots. At 24 years old, he had convinced himself that permanent ties were for men who had something to offer besides calloused hands and a stubborn streak. He guided his tired gelding down the main street, past the assay office and the general store, looking for the livery stable where he hoped to find work mucking stalls in exchange for a place to sleep. The town was smaller than he expected, just a handful of buildings clustered around the railroad tracks, with scattered ranches and homesteads spreading out into the sagebrush flats beyond. The November wind carried the smell of coal smoke and distant snow. The livery owner, a gruff man named Pete Larson with tobacco-stained whiskers, looked Thomas up and down with obvious skepticism. "I do not need help," Pete said, spitting into a coffee can. "But if you are looking for work with horses, Theresa Zimmerman might have something. She is always needing hands, though she is particular about who she hires." "Where would I find her?" "Follow the creek west about 2 miles. You will see her place. Big barn, corrals everywhere, cannot miss it." Pete squinted at him. "Word of advice, though. Do not expect her to make it easy on you. She has turned away more cowboys than she has hired." Thomas thanked him and rode out, curious now despite his exhaustion. The sun was high by the time he spotted the property, and Pete had not exaggerated. The ranch spread across a wide valley where the creek cut through, with corrals and paddocks arranged in careful geometric patterns. The barn was indeed large, freshly painted red with white trim, and several smaller outbuildings dotted the property. But what caught his attention were the horses. Even from a distance, he could see they were exceptional animals. Bays and chestnuts and grays moved through the paddocks with an elegance he rarely saw outside of cavalry demonstrations. Their conformation was nearly perfect, their movements fluid and balanced. These were not ranch ponies or wild mustangs broken to saddle. These were horses bred with intention and expertise. A woman emerged from the barn as he approached, and Thomas felt his breath catch in his chest. She was tall and lean, with dark hair pulled back in a practical braid, wearing men's work pants and a faded blue shirt. She moved with the same purposeful grace as her horses, and when she turned to look at him, he saw a face that was striking rather than pretty, with high cheekbones and eyes the color of strong coffee. She was perhaps 26 or 27, with the sun-weathered skin of someone who spent most of their time outdoors. "Can I help you?" she called out, her voice carrying easily across the yard. Thomas dismounted, leading his gelding closer. "My name is Thomas Harper. Pete Larson in town said you might be hiring." "Did he?" She walked toward him, studying his horse with more interest than she showed in him. "What makes you think you are qualified to work with my stock? I grew up on a ranch. I have been working with horses since I could walk. So has every other cowboy who has ridden out here looking for easy money." She circled his gelding, running her hand along the animal's neck and legs. "Your horse is footsore and underweight. When did you last have him rishad?" Thomas felt his face heat. "It has been a while." "I have been traveling. I can see that." She straightened, fixing him with a direct gaze that made him feel like a green boy instead of a grown man. "I am Theresa Zimmerman. I breed horses here, primarily for the cavalry and for wealthy buyers who appreciate quality stock. My animals are valuable, which means I cannot afford to have someone working with them who is careless or impatient. Most cowboys want to break a horse in 3 days and move on. That is not how I work. How do you work? With precision, with patience, with respect for the animal. She gestured toward the corrals. My breeding program is specific. I select for temperament as much as conformation. I raise horses that are intelligent and willing, not just fast or strong. That requires careful handling from the moment they are born. Thomas looked around the property again, seeing it with new understanding. The corrals were not just well built but thoughtfully designed, with high-quality fencing and ample space. The horses in the nearest paddock were watching them with alert but calm eyes, not shying away or showing signs of mistreatment. "Your husband must be proud of what you have built here," he said. Something flickered across her face, gone too quickly for him to read. "My husband died 4 years ago. This is my operation. I apologize. I did not mean to bring up painful memories. Everyone dies eventually. Robert left me this land and enough money to start the breeding program. What I have built since then is mine." She crossed her arms. "I will give you a trial. 1 week. You will muck stalls, mend fences, haul water, whatever I need. You will not handle any of my breeding stock until I say otherwise. If you prove yourself reliable and patient, we will discuss a permanent position. There is a room in the barn where you can sleep, and you will take meals at the house. Wages are $30 a month plus room and board." It was a generous offer, more than he had expected. "Thank you, Mrs. Zimmerman. I will not disappoint you. We will see." She turned toward the barn. "Put your horse in the end stall. There is grain in the feed room and a curry comb hanging by the tack. Get him settled, then find me. We have work to do." The first 3 days tested every ounce of patience Thomas possessed. Theresa worked him harder than any ranch hand he had ever served under, assigning him the most tedious and physically demanding tasks. He repaired an entire section of fence that had been damaged in a recent windstorm, hauled countless buckets of water to refill troughs, and mucked out every stall in the barn twice. She watched him work with a critical eye, appearing without warning to inspect his progress or reassign him to some new task. But he also watched her, learning her methods by observation. She spent hours each day working with her horses, particularly the younger ones. He saw her gentling a yearling colt with such patience that he marveled at it. She would stand in the corral for 20 minutes without moving, letting the young horse approach her on its own terms, rewarding even the smallest gesture of trust. She never raised her voice, never made sudden movements. Everything was deliberate and calm. On the 4th day, she finally let him into the corral with her. "This is Copper," she said, indicating a 3-year-old gelding with a bright chestnut coat. "He has good bloodlines but a nervous temperament. I have been working with him for 6 months, and he is making progress, but he needs consistent handling. I want you to observe today. Do not speak unless I tell you to, and keep your movements minimal." Thomas leaned against the fence and watched as Theresa worked the gelding on a long lead rope. She asked for simple movements, walking in circles, changing direction, backing up. When Copper became agitated, she did not punish or force him but simply waited, letting him settle himself before asking again. It was a masterclass in patience, and Thomas found himself fascinated not just by the technique, but by the woman employing it. There was something almost meditative about the way she worked, a focus that shut out the rest of the world. He could see the deep knowledge behind every decision, the years of experience that allowed her to read the smallest signs of stress or relaxation in the animal. This was not someone who had inherited a horse ranch and hired others to do the real work. This was someone who understood horses in their bones. "Come here," she called, and he pushed off from the fence. Take the lead. I want to see how you handle him." Thomas approached slowly, taking the rope from her hand. Copper's ears flicked nervously, and he could feel the gelding's tension through the lead. He remembered what he had observed and simply stood still, breathing slowly, letting the horse adjust to the change. It took several minutes before Copper's head lowered slightly, a sign of relaxation. "Good," Theresa said quietly. "Now ask him to walk, gentle pressure, and if he resists, wait." Thomas applied the slightest pull on the lead rope and Copper tossed his head. Instead of pulling harder, Thomas released the pressure and waited. After a moment, he tried again, even more gently. This time, Copper took a single step forward. "That is enough," Theresa said. "Release him and step back. You see how much patience is required. One step is a victory with a horse like this. Tomorrow, maybe he will give you 2 steps. Next week, maybe 10. You cannot rush it. I understand." She studied him for a long moment. "I think you might. Most men I have hired would have already gotten frustrated and tried to force him. You will work with Copper every day now under my supervision. We will see if you really have the patience this work requires." Over the following weeks, Thomas fell into the rhythm of the ranch. His days began before dawn, feeding and watering the horses, checking them for any signs of injury or illness. After breakfast, which Theresa prepared in her small but tidy house, they would work with the horses being trained. In the afternoons, there were always fences to mend, equipment to repair, hay to move, 100 tasks that kept a horse ranch functioning. The work was hard but satisfying in a way that his previous jobs had not been. He was learning something valuable, developing skills that went beyond simple labor. He also learned about Theresa, though she revealed herself slowly, like a wild creature learning to trust. She had grown up in Missouri, the daughter of a horse trader who taught her everything he knew. She married Robert Zimmerman when she was 19. And they came west together with dreams of building something lasting. He had been 15 years older, a gentle man who supported her ambitions but did not share her passion for horses. When he died of pneumonia during a harsh winter, she had mourned him but also found a strange freedom in being able to pursue her vision without compromise. "People in town thought I would fail," she told Thomas one evening as they walked the property, checking the fence lines. "A widow running a horse ranch alone. They expected me to sell out within a year. Some of the men made offers, always lower than the property was worth, assuming I was desperate. But I knew what I was doing. My father taught me to see quality in horseflesh, to understand bloodlines and breeding. I just had to prove it." "You have proven it," Thomas said. "Your horses are the finest I have seen. They are getting better every year. I am refining my breeding lines, selecting for specific traits. In 5 years, I want to be supplying horses to the cavalry that are superior to anything they can get elsewhere. In 10 years, I want to have a reputation that extends to the East Coast." Her ambition was breathtaking, and Thomas found himself drawn not just to her beauty, which became more apparent to him each day, but to the fierce intelligence and determination that drove her. She was unlike any woman he had known, existing outside the narrow confines that society tried to impose. She wore what was practical, said what she thought, and built her life according to her own vision. He was falling in love with her. He realized one cold December morning as he watched her deliver a foal with skilled hands and infinite gentleness. The birth was complicated, the mare struggling, and Theresa worked for 3 hours to bring the foal safely into the world. When the gangly bay colt finally stood on shaking legs and found his mother's milk, Theresa sat back in the straw with exhaustion and relief written across her face. Thomas brought her coffee and a blanket, and when she smiled up at him in gratitude, he felt something shift permanently in his chest, but he said nothing. She was his employer, a woman of property and ambition. He was a drifter with no prospects beyond the job she had given him. Whatever he felt, he would keep to himself and be grateful for the privilege of working beside her. Winter settled over Nevada with cold winds and occasional snow. The work continued, though some tasks became more challenging in the freezing temperatures. Thomas proved himself again and again, showing not just competence but genuine understanding of what Theresa was trying to achieve. She began to trust him with more responsibility, letting him work the younger horses alone, seeking his opinion on breeding decisions, including him in her plans for the ranch's future. They spent long evenings in the barn office, a small room with a wood stove and a desk covered in breeding records and bloodline charts. Theresa would explain her thinking, showing him how she tracked traits through generations, how she selected stallions and mares to complement each other's strengths and minimize weaknesses. Thomas absorbed it all, asking questions, offering observations, gradually becoming not just a hired hand but a partner in the enterprise. One January evening, as a blizzard howled outside and they sat close to the wood stove with mugs of hot coffee, Theresa looked at him with an expression he could not quite read. "You have been here almost 3 months," she said. "You are the longest any hired man has lasted." "Why did the others leave?" "I fired most of them for carelessness or impatience. A few left on their own because they did not like taking orders from a woman." She wrapped her hands around her mug. "Does it bother you working for me?" "No, why would it? Most men have fragile pride. They cannot stand the idea that a woman might know more than they do about something." Thomas considered this. "My mother ran our ranch as much as my father did, maybe more. She was the one who kept the books, made the deals, decided what stock to sell and when. My father was good with cattle, but she was good with everything. I learned early that women are just as capable as men, sometimes more so. Your mother sounds like a wise woman. She was. She died when I was 18. My father followed her 2 years later. I think he just gave up without her." "I am sorry." Theresa's voice was soft. "It is a terrible thing to lose the person who is your match in this world. Is that what your husband was to you?" She was quiet for a long moment, staring into her coffee. "Robert was a good man, kind and steady, but we were not a match, not truly. He loved me and I cared for him, but we wanted different things. He would have been happy with a small ranch, a few horses, a simple life. I wanted to build an empire. He supported me, but he never understood the fire in me, the need to create something exceptional." "You regret marrying him?" "No, he gave me the foundation I needed to do this work, and he taught me something important." "What is that?" "That kindness matters, but it is not enough. Not for me. I need someone who shares my vision, who feels the same passion for this work that I do." She looked at him directly. "I think you might be that person, Thomas." His heart hammered in his chest. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that over these months I have come to value you, not just as a worker but as someone I can trust, someone who understands what I am trying to build here. I am saying that when I think about the future of this ranch, I find myself including you in those plans. Theresa." He set down his mug, afraid his shaking hands would spill the coffee. "I feel the same way, more than that. I have been half in love with you since the first week I was here, but I did not think you could ever see me as anything more than a hired hand. Then you were not paying attention." A smile played at the corners of her mouth. "I do not let just anyone into my breeding program, Thomas. I do not share my plans and dreams with people I do not trust, and I certainly do not spend every possible moment with someone unless I want to." He moved closer, reaching out to take her hand. "I have nothing to offer you, no property, no money, nothing but the work of my hands. You have patience, you have understanding, You have a passion for this work that matches my own. That is worth more than money." She squeezed his hand. "I am not looking for someone to take care of me. I can take care of myself. I am looking for a partner, someone to build this dream with. If you want that, if you want me, then we can figure out the rest together." "I do want that. I want you. I want this life we could build together." "Then kiss me, you foolish man, before I change my mind." He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, but she met him halfway. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but it quickly deepened into something urgent and honest. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Thomas rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said. "I know it is too soon to say it, but I do." "It is not too soon. I love you too." She laughed, the sound bright with joy. "I have been fighting it for weeks, telling myself it was impractical and risky, but I cannot help how I feel. You are what I have been waiting for, Thomas Harper." They were married in March, a simple ceremony in the small church in Carlin with just a handful of witnesses. Theresa wore a practical blue dress, Thomas his only suit, and they pledged themselves to each other with simple gold bands. The preacher seemed uncertain about the match, a widow marrying her hired hand, but Theresa met his doubts with such a fierce glare that he wisely kept his concerns to himself. They honeymooned for 3 days, a luxury they could barely afford with spring work pressing on the ranch. But Theresa insisted they needed time alone, away from the endless demands of the horses. They rented a room in a hotel in Elko, spent hours talking and making love and dreaming about their future. Thomas had never been happier in his life. He had found not just a wife but a true partner, someone whose ambitions matched his own, whose passion for their work was as deep as his growing love for her. When they returned to the ranch, they threw themselves into the spring season with renewed energy. There were foals being born almost weekly now, the result of Theresa's careful breeding planning. Each one was evaluated, measured, its bloodlines recorded in her meticulous books. Thomas helped with the deliveries, learned to spot potential in the gangly newborns, began to understand the complex calculus of breeding that Theresa had mastered. They also began to make changes to the ranch itself. With Thomas now a full partner, they planned expansions. They built new corrals designed for training young horses, added a covered arena where they could work even in bad weather, improved the barn with better ventilation and lighting. Every decision was made together, debated and refined until they both agreed it was right. The town's attitude toward them was mixed. Some people respected what Theresa had built and welcomed Thomas as a steadying influence. Others whispered that she had married beneath her station, that a widow of property should have chosen a man of means rather than a drifter. Theresa ignored the gossip with magnificent indifference, but Thomas sometimes felt the sting of it. "They do not matter," Theresa told him one evening when he mentioned it. "We know what we have built together. We know what we mean to each other. The opinions of small-minded people are worth less than dust. I just wish I had more to bring to our partnership. You built all of this before I arrived, and it will be so much more with you here. Thomas, you have to stop measuring yourself by what you had when you arrived and start seeing what you contribute every single day. Your patience with the horses, your skill in training, your ideas for improving our breeding program. You are not just a hired hand I married. You are my husband and my partner, and this ranch is as much yours now as it is mine." Her faith in him gradually eroded his doubts. He threw himself into the work with even greater dedication, determined to prove worthy of her trust. And as the months passed, he found that he had a real talent for this work. He could read horses almost as well as Theresa could, understanding their individual personalities and needs. He developed training techniques that complemented hers, approaching problems from different angles. Together, they made a formidable team. In late summer, a cavalry officer named Captain Richardson arrived from Fort Halleck, having heard about Theresa's breeding program. He spent 3 days at the ranch, examining horses, watching them be put through their paces, asking detailed questions about bloodlines and training methods. Theresa was professional and knowledgeable, answering every question with confidence, and Thomas supported her by demonstrating the horse's abilities. On the final day, Captain Richardson made an offer to purchase 6 horses, all 3-year-olds ready for cavalry training, at a price that made Thomas's head spin. "These are exceptional animals, Mrs. Harper," the captain said as they finalized the paperwork in the barn office. "I have been evaluating horses for the cavalry for 15 years, and I have rarely seen better. If the rest of your stock is of this quality, I expect we will be doing regular business." After he left, leading a string of horses toward Fort Halleck, Theresa and Thomas stood in the yard watching them go. The price the captain had paid represented a year's worth of income from their previous sales. It was proof that Theresa's breeding program had achieved something truly special. "We did it," she said quietly. "We actually did it. You did it. This was your vision, your work." "Our work," she corrected, taking his hand. "I could not have managed all of this alone, Thomas. Your help has been invaluable, especially these last months. The training program you developed for the 3-year-olds made all the difference." Captain Richardson specifically commented on how responsive and well-mannered they were. "I learned from the best." He pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "I am so proud of you, of us, of what we are building together." That night, lying in bed in the house that was now truly theirs together, Theresa turned to him with a thoughtful expression. "I have been thinking," she said, "about the future, about what comes next for the ranch." "What are you thinking?" "That we should expand the breeding program even more. With the cavalry contract, we will have steady income. We can invest in better breeding stock, perhaps purchase a stallion from back east with championship bloodlines. We could double our production within 3 years." Thomas ran his fingers through her hair, marveling as always at the mind constantly working behind those dark eyes. "That sounds ambitious and expensive." "It is both. But I think we can do it. No, I know we can do it together." "Then we will. Whatever you need, whatever the ranch needs, we will find a way." She kissed him, slow and deep. "I love you, Thomas Harper. I love that you believe in me, in us, in what we can accomplish. I never thought I would find this, someone who truly understands me." "I never thought I would find a home," he admitted. "I spent 3 years drifting, convinced that I was not meant to settle anywhere. And then I rode onto your property and found everything I had been looking for without knowing it." They made love slowly, tenderly, a celebration of everything they had built and everything they would build together. Afterward, Theresa fell asleep in his arms, and Thomas lay awake for a while, listening to her breathe, feeling the profound contentment of a man who had found his place in the world. The following year brought both triumphs and challenges. True to Captain Richardson's word, the cavalry became regular customers, purchasing horses 3 or 4 times a year. Theresa and Thomas invested the profits wisely, purchasing a magnificent Morgan stallion from a breeder in Vermont and several mares with exceptional bloodlines. The breeding program expanded exactly as Theresa had envisioned, but success brought its own pressures. They were working harder than ever, often 16-hour days during the busy seasons. There were more horses to train, more buyers to satisfy, more details to manage. Thomas sometimes worried that they were pushing themselves too hard, but Theresa seemed to thrive on the challenge. In the spring of 1885, Theresa discovered she was pregnant. The news brought a new dimension to their planning, forcing them to think about how a child would fit into the demanding life they had built. Thomas was overjoyed but also anxious about how they would manage everything. "We will hire more help," Theresa said practically. "We can afford it now, and we need it anyway with the expanded breeding program. I will not stop working, but I will be more careful, and you are going to have to take on more of the training duties." "Whatever you need," Thomas promised. "I just want you and the baby to be healthy." "We will be." Women have been having babies and running ranches for generations. I am not the first, and I will not be the last. They hired 2 young men from town, brothers named Jack and Samuel Morrison, who were eager to learn the horse business. Thomas trained them in the basics, gradually delegating the routine tasks so he and Theresa could focus on the more critical aspects of breeding and training. It was an adjustment, learning to trust others with work they had always done themselves, but it freed up time and energy they badly needed. In October, Theresa gave birth to a healthy boy they named William after Thomas's father. The delivery was long and difficult, and Thomas spent hours pacing outside the bedroom while the midwife worked. When he was finally allowed in and saw Theresa holding their son, exhausted but radiant, he felt something break open in his chest. "He is perfect," Thomas whispered, touching the baby's impossibly small hand. "He is ours," Theresa said, smiling. "Our son, the beginning of our family." The first months of parenthood were harder than either of them anticipated. William was a colicky baby who cried often and slept poorly. Theresa was determined to continue working, but the combination of caring for an infant and managing the ranch left her exhausted. Thomas took on as much as he could, both with the baby and the horses, but there were only so many hours in a day. They argued sometimes, short-tempered from lack of sleep, snapping at each other over minor issues. Thomas suggested they hire a woman from town to help with the baby, but Theresa refused, insisting she could manage. It was their first real conflict, and it lasted for weeks until finally Theresa admitted she needed help. "I am not failing if I accept assistance," she said one night, tears in her eyes. "I know that in my head, but my pride keeps getting in the way. I have spent so many years proving I could do everything myself. Asking for help feels like admitting defeat. It is not defeat. It is being smart about how we manage our resources." Thomas held her close. "You are the most capable person I know, Theresa, but even you cannot do everything. Let us hire someone to help with William during the day. You can still be his mother, still care for him, but you will not be so exhausted that you can barely function." They found a widow named Mrs. Chen, a Chinese woman whose husband had died in a mining accident. She had raised 5 children of her own and had a calm, competent manner that put both Theresa and Thomas at ease. With her help, life became more manageable. Theresa could focus on the horses while knowing William was in good hands, and the constant tension that had been building between them eased. As William grew from infant to toddler, he showed signs of his parents' temperaments. He was curious and determined, fascinated by the horses from the moment he could toddle into the barn. Thomas built him a small rocking horse, and William would spend hours riding it, making galloping sounds and demanding stories about the real horses in the corrals. The ranch continued to prosper. By 1887, they had more than 50 horses at various stages of training, with foals being born regularly and buyers coming from as far away as California and Colorado. Theresa's reputation had spread exactly as she had hoped, and the Zimmerman Harper Ranch was becoming known as one of the premier horse breeding operations in the West. They expanded the house, adding rooms for their growing family and for Mrs. Chen, who had become an indispensable part of their household. They built a better bunkhouse for the Morrison brothers and the additional hands they had hired. The ranch that Theresa had started alone was now a thriving operation employing 8 people and supporting multiple families. On a warm evening in June, Thomas and Theresa sat on the porch watching William play with a gentle old mare in the nearest paddock. The boy was 3 years old now, fearless and bright, already showing an intuitive understanding of horses that delighted both his parents. "Do you remember when you first rode up to this place?" Theresa asked, leaning against Thomas's shoulder. "You looked like you had not had a decent meal in weeks. I remember you looking at me like I was something the cat dragged in and had the bad judgment not to bury." She laughed. "I was skeptical. So many men had come through claiming they knew horses, but none of them had any patience. None of them understood what I was trying to build. And now I cannot imagine doing this without you. You have become such an essential part of this operation, such an essential part of my life. Do you ever regret it? Staying here, tying yourself to this place to me?" Thomas turned to look at her, seeing the woman who had become his entire world. There were fine lines around her eyes now, put there by years of squinting into the sun and smiling. Her hands were rough from hard work, her skin tanned dark. She was more beautiful to him than the day they met. "Not for a single moment," he said. "I spent years drifting because I did not know what I was looking for. And then I found it here. I found purpose in this work, pride in what we have built together. I found love. I found home. How could I possibly regret any of that? I feel the same way. When Robert died, I thought I would spend the rest of my life alone, pouring everything into this ranch because there was nothing else. And then you arrived, and suddenly I had a partner, someone who saw my vision and helped me make it bigger and better than I could have alone." William came running up to the porch, his face flushed with excitement. "Mama, Papa, can I ride Lady tomorrow, please? I will be very good and very careful." Theresa smiled. "We will see. You need to practice more on your pony first. Lady is very gentle, but she is also very big. When you can control your pony perfectly, then we will talk about letting you ride Lady." "I will practice every day," William promised. "I will be the best rider ever." "I do not doubt it," Thomas said, ruffling his son's hair. "You have good teachers." That night, after William was asleep and the ranch was quiet, Theresa told Thomas she was pregnant again. The news filled him with joy and a familiar anxiety. The first pregnancy and birth had been so difficult, and he worried about Theresa's health. "I am older now," she acknowledged. "And this pregnancy will be harder. But I want more children, Thomas. I want William to have siblings. I want to build not just a ranch but a legacy, something we can pass down to our children and grandchildren. Then that is what we will do. But you have to promise me you will be careful, that you will let me and Mrs. Chen and everyone else take on more so you are not exhausting yourself." "I promise. I have learned my lesson about trying to do everything myself." Their daughter was born in February of 1888, an easier delivery than William's had been. They named her Clara after Theresa's mother, and she was a quiet, observant baby who seemed to take in everything around her with solemn, dark eyes. William adored his little sister, wanting to help with everything, and Thomas and Theresa found themselves navigating the joys and challenges of raising 2 small children while running an increasingly demanding operation. But they managed because they were partners in every sense of the word. When one of them was overwhelmed, the other stepped in. When they disagreed, they talked it through until they found a solution. They had built their marriage on the same principles that guided their horse breeding program: patience, precision, and deep respect for each other. The ranch continued to grow and evolve. They began hosting an annual auction, inviting buyers from across the region to bid on their finest horses. The events became social occasions, with the ranch filling with visitors for several days, everyone marveling at the quality of the stock and the expertise of the operation. Theresa was in her element during these auctions, showcasing her horses and explaining her breeding philosophy to anyone who would listen. Thomas preferred to stay in the background, working with the horses and making sure everything ran smoothly. But people began to recognize his contributions as well. Several buyers specifically sought him out, wanting to learn his training techniques, offering substantial sums for horses he had personally trained. It was gratifying to be recognized for his skill, to be seen as more than just Theresa's husband. In the summer of 1890, they purchased the adjacent property, an additional 300 acres that gave them room to further expand. They built new facilities, improved their breeding stock with careful purchases, and refined their training programs. What Theresa had started as a widow's desperate attempt to survive had become one of the most successful horse ranching operations in Nevada. But more than professional success, they had built a life together that was rich with love and purpose. On quiet evenings, after the children were in bed and the ranch was settled for the night, they would sit together and talk about their dreams. They planned expansions, debated breeding decisions, and imagined the futures of their children. William, now 6 years old, was already an accomplished young rider with a deep understanding of horses. He followed his parents around the ranch, absorbing everything they taught him, asking endless questions. Clara, at 2, was more reserved but equally fascinated by the animals. She would sit for hours watching the horses, perfectly still, her attention absolute. "They are going to carry on what we have built," Theresa said one evening, watching the children play in the yard. "They will take this ranch to heights we cannot even imagine." "If that is what they want," Thomas said, "we should not force them into this life if they want something different." "Of course not. But I think they will want it. How could they not? They are growing up surrounded by these magnificent animals, learning from the best." She smiled at him. "Learning from you, from both of us. You are the one with the vision, the breeding knowledge. I just help execute it. You are much more than that, and you know it. Thomas, you have to stop diminishing your contributions. This operation would not be what it is without you. Your training program, your patience with difficult horses, your business sense. You are as responsible for our success as I am." It was an ongoing argument between them, Thomas's tendency to credit Theresa with everything and Theresa's insistence that they were equal partners. The truth, as with most things in their marriage, lay somewhere in between. They each brought different strengths to the operation, and it was the combination that made them so successful. As the years passed, the ranch became legendary. People traveled from distant states just to see the operation, to purchase horses bred and trained by Theresa and Thomas Harper. They turned down far more offers than they accepted, maintaining strict standards for where their horses went and who purchased them. Theresa refused to sell to anyone she suspected would mistreat the animals, even when offered exorbitant prices. "Our reputation is built on the quality of our horses and the knowledge that we care about their welfare," she told a disappointed buyer who had failed her scrutiny. "I will not sell to someone who sees horses as just property. These are living creatures who deserve respect and good treatment." In 1893, tragedy struck when a fire broke out in the main barn. Thomas woke to the smell of smoke and immediately roused Theresa. Together, they ran to the barn, finding it already engulfed in flames. They worked frantically to release the horses, throwing open stall doors and driving the panicked animals to safety. The Morrison brothers and other ranch hands joined them, everyone risking their lives to save the horses. By the time the fire burned itself out, they had saved all but 2 horses, both elderly animals who had succumbed to smoke before they could be reached. The barn was a total loss, along with years' worth of equipment, saddles, breeding records, everything Theresa had so carefully maintained. Theresa stood in the smoking ruins the next morning, tears streaming down her face. It was the first time Thomas had seen her cry since William's difficult birth. "All of my records," she said. "Years of careful documentation, bloodlines, breeding notes, everything. Gone." Thomas put his arm around her. "We will rebuild. The horses are safe, and that is what matters. We know the bloodlines, we can recreate the records. It will take time, but we will do it together." "I feel like such a fool. I should have made copies, should have stored important documents in the house. I was careless. You were human. We all make mistakes." He turned her to face him. "Theresa, we have survived worse than this. We will survive this too. We have each other, we have our children, we have the horses. Everything else can be rebuilt." The entire community rallied around them. Neighbors arrived with supplies and labor, helping to clear the debris and begin construction of a new barn. Even people who had been critical of Theresa's unconventional ways showed up to help. In 3 months, they had a new barn, larger and better designed than the old one. Theresa painstakingly recreated her breeding records from memory, and Thomas helped her fill in gaps and verify information. The fire, devastating as it was, became a turning point. It showed them how much support they had built in the community, how much respect their work had earned. It also reminded them of what truly mattered. The horses were alive, their family was safe, and their partnership was strong enough to weather any challenge. In the years that followed, they built the operation back stronger than before. They implemented new safety measures, stored important documents in a fireproof safe in the house, and trained all the ranch hands in emergency procedures. The quality of their horses never wavered, and their reputation continued to grow. William grew into a confident young man with his mother's eye for horses and his father's patient training methods. At 16, he was already handling complex training challenges and making valuable contributions to the breeding program. Clara, at 12, showed a gift for the business side of the operation, keeping meticulous records and demonstrating a shrewd understanding of market dynamics. Theresa and Thomas watched their children develop with pride, seeing the legacy they had built being carried forward. But they also made sure to spend time together, just the 2 of them, maintaining the connection that had always been the foundation of everything else. On their 15th wedding anniversary, Thomas took Theresa on a trip to San Francisco, leaving the ranch in the capable hands of William and the Morrison brothers. It was the longest they had been away from the operation since it began, and Theresa was nervous at first, constantly worrying about what might be going wrong in their absence. But gradually, she relaxed, enjoying the luxury of fine hotels and restaurants, the novelty of city life. They attended a horse show, where Theresa struck up conversations with breeders from across the country, exchanging ideas and making connections. They walked through Golden Gate Park, attended the theater, and spent long hours talking about everything and nothing. On their last night in the city, sitting in their hotel room overlooking the bay, Thomas took Theresa's hand. "You ever wonder what your life would have been like if I had never ridden onto your ranch that day?" he asked. "Sometimes. I think I would have been successful but lonely. I would have built the horse operation, probably to about the same level, but there would have been something missing. The joy of sharing it with someone who truly understands." She squeezed his hand. "What about you? Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had ridden past Carlin, if you had never stopped? I think I would have drifted forever, never finding what I was searching for because I did not even know what it was." You saved me, Theresa. Not just by giving me a job, but by showing me what my life could be. You taught me that patience and dedication could build something lasting. You gave me purpose. We saved each other, she said. I was drowning in loneliness and stubborn pride, convinced I had to do everything alone. You showed me that partnership did not mean weakness, that sharing my dreams with someone else could make them bigger and better. We have built something extraordinary together, Thomas. Not just the ranch, but our marriage, our family, this life we share. They made love that night with the tenderness of long familiarity and the passion that had never quite faded, even after 15 years. In the morning, they traveled back to Carlin, back to the ranch and the children and the horses, back to the life they had built together. The turn of the century brought new challenges and opportunities. The automobile was beginning to appear, and some people predicted it would make horses obsolete. But Thomas and Theresa were not worried. There would always be a need for quality horses, whether for work, transportation, or sport. They continued to refine their breeding program, now focusing on horses suitable for showing and pleasure riding as well as working stock. In 1902, William married a young woman named Sarah, the daughter of a rancher from Wyoming. She fit seamlessly into the operation, bringing her own knowledge and skills. Within a year, she gave birth to Theresa and Thomas's first grandchild, a boy they named Robert after Theresa's first husband. Holding her grandson for the first time, Theresa felt the circle of life completing itself. Robert Zimmerman had given her the foundation to build her dream. Thomas had helped her make that dream a reality, and now a new Robert would carry it forward into the future. Clara showed no interest in marriage, declaring at 18 that she intended to focus on expanding the ranch's business operations. Theresa supported her fully, having lived her own unconventional life and understanding her daughter's ambitions. Clara began traveling to horse shows and auctions across the country, representing the ranch and building connections that brought in new business. As Thomas and Theresa moved into their 50s, they gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations, letting William and Clara take the lead while they focused on the bigger picture. They consulted on breeding decisions, worked with particularly challenging horses, and served as advisors and mentors. It was satisfying to see their children not just continuing what they had built, but making it their own, bringing new ideas and approaches. On a spring morning in 1905, Thomas woke to find Theresa sitting by the window, watching the sunrise over the ranch. At 53, she was still beautiful to him, her hair now streaked with gray, her face lined by time and sun and laughter. She had devoted her life to this land and these horses, and it showed in every capable movement, every shrewd decision. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, coming to stand behind her. "How blessed we have been. How everything I hoped for has come true and in ways I never could have imagined." "You made it come true, through hard work and determination and brilliance. We made it come true together." She leaned back against him. "I was just thinking about that day you rode up to the ranch, so skinny and desperate with that footsore horse and barely any money, I almost sent you away. Why did you not? Something in your eyes, a willingness to learn, a depth of patience that most cowboys did not have. I took a chance on you, and it was the best decision I ever made." Thomas wrapped his arms around her, looking out at the ranch they had built together. Dozens of horses grazed in the paddocks, their coats gleaming in the morning sun. The barn and outbuildings stood solid and well maintained. Corrals and fences stretched in careful geometric patterns across the property. Everything was precise, organized, the result of decades of careful planning and execution. "I love you," he said. "I have loved you since I was a foolish young man who did not know what he was looking for." I love you more now than I did then, because I understand what a gift this life is, what a gift you are. I love you too. You taught me that I did not have to choose between my ambitions and having a partner. You showed me that the right person makes everything better, not more difficult. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the ranch wake up. William emerged from the house he shared with Sarah, heading toward the barn to begin the morning feeding. Clara appeared from the office, already reviewing papers, probably preparing for an upcoming trip to a horse show in Denver. "We did well, did we not?" Theresa said softly. "Not just with the ranch, but with everything. Our marriage, our children, the life we built. We did exceptionally well. Better than I ever dreamed possible." They lived another 20 years together, watching the ranch continue to grow and evolve under William and Clara's leadership. They welcomed more grandchildren, taught them about horses and patience and the value of precision in all things. They traveled occasionally, always together, exploring places they had never seen but always glad to return home to Carlin and the ranch. Thomas died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 72, his hand holding Theresa's. She mourned him deeply but without regret, grateful for every year, every day, every moment they had shared. She lived another 5 years, still visiting the barns daily, still offering advice on breeding decisions, still finding joy in the horses she had devoted her life to. When she died at 77, it was in the bedroom of the house she had shared with Thomas, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. Her last words were about a particularly promising foal that had been born that morning, her mind focused on the future even at the end. They buried her next to Thomas on a hill overlooking the ranch, where they could watch over the operation they had built together. The ranch continued to thrive under family ownership, generation after generation, always maintaining the standards of precision and patience that Theresa had established and Thomas had helped perfect. The story of the widow who bred horses with precision and the cowboy who learned that patience wins the best ones became local legend, passed down through the family and the community. It was a story about partnership and perseverance, about finding your match in this world and building something lasting together. It was a story about horses, yes, but more importantly, it was a story about love. In the years that followed, when people asked about the success of the Zimmerman Harper Ranch, the answer was always the same. It was built on precision breeding, patient training, and the partnership of two people who understood that the best things in life cannot be rushed. They come to those willing to wait, to work, to dedicate themselves fully to what matters. Thomas had ridden into Carlin with nothing but hope and a tired horse. He left behind a legacy that would last generations, a thriving ranch, a loving family, and the memory of a marriage built on mutual respect and deep, abiding love. Theresa had started with land, ambition, and lonely determination. She created an empire and found a partner who made every triumph sweeter and every challenge more bearable. Together, they proved that patience really does win the best ones in horses and in love. Their story became woven into the fabric of Carlin, Nevada, a testament to what two people can build when they find each other and refuse to settle for anything less than extraordinary. The ranch still stands today, still breeding exceptional horses, still maintained with the precision and patience that Theresa and Thomas established more than a century ago. And on quiet mornings, when the sun rises over the corrals and the horses move through the paddocks with that same elegant grace, it is easy to imagine the widow and the cowboy walking together, hand in hand, watching over the legacy they built through love, patience, and unwavering dedication to each other, and the magnificent animals they devoted their lives to raising.